Blood was filling my lungs the last time I saw my husband's smiling face. He stood on the deck of our mega yacht, watching me drown casually, holding the life insurance policy that would soon pay off his massive secret debts. When I gasped my final breath in that freezing water, I thought my story was over. But then I woke up 3 years earlier, sitting on the velvet sofa in my father's study, right before my sister stole the man who murdered me. Gasping, I clawed at my throat, expecting my hands to meet the icy, unforgiving waves of the Tyrrhenian Sea. Instead, my fingernails dug into the soft cashmere of my sweater. My chest heaved. I wasn't drowning. There was no salt water burning my sinuses, no crushing pressure in my ears, and no Alaric Carmichael staring down at me with those dead shark-like eyes. Instead, the rich, heavy scent of my father's mahogany study filled my nose, undercut by the sharp, cloying sting of Chanel No. 5. Are you going to stare at the wall all day, Chloe? Or are you actually going to get ready? I blinked against the sudden harshness of the afternoon sun streaming through the bay windows. Standing in front of me, hands planted firmly on her perfectly manicured hips, was my older sister Sabrina. She was alive. She looked young, vibrant, and utterly oblivious to the violent tremor shaking my hands. What day is it? I whispered, my voice sounding incredibly small, raspy as if I had actually been screaming underwater for hours. Sabrina rolled her eyes, a gesture so profoundly familiar it made my stomach churn. It's May 14th. Are you having a mental breakdown? Because if you are, please save it for tomorrow. Alaric Carmichael is arriving in 3 hours, and Father will literally disown us both if we embarrass him. May 14th. 3 years ago. My mind spun dizzily as the memories crashed into me like a freight train. In my past life, this was the exact day my father, Ricky Adams, invited the youngest billionaire in the state, Alaric Carmichael, to our estate. Our father's shipping logistics company was hemorrhaging money, teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. Alaric, the golden boy of venture capital and real estate, was looking for a respectable, high-society wife to polish his public image ahead of a massive political run. It was a transaction, a merger. In that past life, I had been desperate for my father's approval. I had worn my mother's vintage crimson Dior gown. I had smiled perfectly, laughed at all of Alaric's dry jokes, and played the piano for him after dinner. I had won the prize. Alaric chose me, and Sabrina had thrown a fit of epic proportions, locking herself in her room for 3 days. I thought I had won the lottery. I thought I was stepping into a fairy tale. I didn't know that Alaric's pristine empire was built on a mountain of illegal offshore debt to the Castellano family. I didn't know that he despised women, or that his massive, isolated estate in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, would become my personal purgatory. I didn't know about the slow, methodical poisoning that would make me too weak to leave the house, or the forced vacation to Capri that was actually a meticulously planned execution to collect a $50 million life insurance payout. Earth to Chloe. Sabrina snapped her fingers in front of my face, her massive diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. I swear you are completely useless. I'm claiming the master bathroom. Don't even think about coming upstairs for the next hour. As she turned on her heel and strutted out of the study, a strange cold calm washed over me. The terror receding, replaced by something much darker. A venomous, absolute clarity. I was back. I was breathing. And Alaric Carmichael was coming here tonight to select his victim. I stood up, my legs trembling slightly before finding their strength. I walked over to the antique mirror hanging above the fireplace. I looked exactly as I had 3 years ago, pale, wide-eyed, with soft, unassuming features. I was the perfect target for a predator. Docile, obedient, but not anymore. If Alaric wanted a wife to torture and kill, he wasn't going to get me. But he needed someone. And Sabrina had always wanted exactly what was mine. She had spent our entire childhood stealing my toys, my friends, my opportunities. She was consumed by a toxic competitive greed that blinded her to anything but winning. A slow smile crept onto my face, chilling even me. I didn't need to fight her this time. I didn't need to protect myself by running away. All I had to do was step aside, bow my head, and hold the door open as my sister sprinted headfirst into a beautiful, gilded death trap. The game began in the closet. I knew Sabrina's psychology better than anyone. If I told her to take Alaric, she would be suspicious. If I acted indifferent, she might not try hard enough. To make Sabrina want something, I had to act like it was my most prized possession. I walked into my bedroom and carefully pulled the vintage crimson Dior gown from its garment bag. It was breathtaking, a sleek silk masterpiece that draped like liquid blood. In my past life, wearing this dress had caught Alaric's eye the second he walked through the door. I laid it out on my bed and carefully positioned a matching pair of Louboutins next to it. Then I left my bedroom door wide open and walked down the hall to fetch a glass of water. It took exactly 4 minutes. When I returned, the dress was gone. In its place was a crumpled pale pink chiffon dress that belonged to Sabrina, something frumpy, childish, and entirely forgettable. "Sabrina!" I called out, injecting my voice with manufactured panic. I rushed to her room, throwing the door open. She was already standing in front of her full-length mirror, the crimson silk clinging to her curves perfectly. She turned to me, a smug, unapologetic smirk plastered across her face. "It fits me better anyway," she said, dismissively admiring her reflection. "That pale pink thing washes you out. Consider it a favor, Chloe." I forced tears into my eyes, letting my lip tremble just enough. "But Father said I should wear the Dior. It was Mother's. You know how important tonight is." "Oh, grow up!" Sabrina scoffed, turning her back to me to fiddle with a diamond necklace. "Tonight is about saving the company. Alaric Carmichael is a billionaire. He needs a woman who looks like she belongs on the cover of Vogue, not a frightened little mouse. Put on the pink dress and stay out of my way." I lowered my head, hiding the vicious, triumphant smile that threatened to break my facade. "Fine," I whispered, sounding utterly defeated. "If you think it's best." I walked back to my room, slipping into the frumpy pink chiffon. I tied my hair back into a severe, unflattering bun. I washed off my makeup, leaving only a touch of lip balm. By the time I looked in the mirror, I looked dull, uninteresting, and completely harmless. I looked like a background character, exactly what Alaric Carmichael hated. At precisely 7 p.m., the doorbell echoed through the grand foyer. My father, sweating nervously in his custom Tom Ford suit, rushed to open it. I stood on the landing of the grand staircase, just a few steps behind Sabrina, who was practically vibrating with anticipation. When the heavy oak door swung open, the air in my lungs vanished. Alaric Carmichael stepped into the entryway. He was just as devastatingly handsome as I remembered. Tall, with broad shoulders, tailored perfectly into a charcoal Brioni suit. His dark hair was meticulously styled, and his jawline looked sharp enough to cut glass. But it was his eyes, those pale, ice-blue eyes, that sent a spike of pure terror straight into my heart. To the rest of the world, they were striking. To me, they were the eyes of the man who had watched me drown without blinking. "Alaric, my boy, welcome!" My father boomed, overcompensating with a loud, booming laugh, pumping the billionaire's hand eagerly. "Ricky, thank you for having me!" Alaric replied, his voice a smooth, rich baritone that hid the monster beneath. Allow me to introduce my daughters, Father said, gesturing to the stairs. Sabrina descended first, moving like a runway model. The crimson dress flowed around her, catching Alaric's immediate attention. His eyes raked over her, calculating, assessing. He didn't look at her with desire. He looked at her the way a jeweler appraises a diamond, or a butcher appraises a cut of meat. This is my eldest, Sabrina, Father beamed. Sabrina extended her hand, her voice dropping an octave into a sultry purr. It's an absolute pleasure, Mr. Carmichael. I've read all about your latest acquisitions in the tech sector. Fascinating work. Please call me Alaric. He smiled, taking her hand and brushing his lips lightly against her knuckles. And the pleasure is entirely mine. You look stunning, Sabrina. I stayed back, gripping the banister. And this is my youngest, Chloe, Father said, his tone notably less enthusiastic, as I finally stepped into the light. Alaric's gaze shifted to me. I deliberately slumped my shoulders, slightly breaking eye contact immediately and staring at his polished shoes. I gave a weak, awkward wave. Hello. Alaric's smile didn't reach his eyes. He analyzed my frumpy dress, my lack of makeup, my nervous posture. In his world of ruthless perfection, I was an eyesore. I saw the imperceptible tightening of his jaw, a sign of disgust I had learned to recognize during my years of captivity. Chloe. He nodded curtly, instantly dismissing me. He turned all his attention back to Sabrina. The hook was set. Dinner was a masterclass in manipulation. We sat in the formal dining room beneath the glittering chandelier. Sabrina completely dominated the conversation aggressively, flaunting her knowledge of art, her expensive tastes, and her social connections. She was painting herself as the ultimate trophy wife. I sat quietly, eating small bites, deliberately playing the clumsy fool. When the maid came around to pour the vintage Bordeaux, I accidentally knocked my elbow against the crystal glass. The red wine spilled across the pristine white tablecloth, splashing onto Alaric's cuff. Oh, I'm so sorry! I gasped, jumping up and knocking my chair backward with a loud clatter. I grabbed my napkin and frantically dabbed at the table, making the stain worse. My father looked like he wanted to strangle me. Chloe, for God's sake, sit down. Maria will handle it. Alaric looked at his stained cuff, a flash of genuine dark rage passing over his features before he quickly masked it with a polite smile. It's quite all right, Ricky. Accidents happen. But when he looked at me, his eyes were glacial. Sabrina laughed a high, mocking sound. You have to excuse my sister Alaric. She's always been a bit uncoordinated, not exactly suited for high-pressure environments. Alaric turned to Sabrina, his expression softening into something dangerously charming. It takes a certain kind of grace to navigate our world, Sabrina. A grace you clearly possess in abundance. Sabrina blushed, practically glowing with victory. She shot me a look of pure venom and triumph across the table. I won, her eyes said. Yes, you did, I thought, hiding my face behind my napkin to conceal my smile. You won him. God help you. By the end of the evening, the deal was done. While Sabrina and I waited in the parlor, Alaric and my father retreated to the study. When they emerged 30 minutes later, my father looked like a man who had just been pardoned from death row. Alaric walked straight to Sabrina. He didn't drop to one knee, he was too arrogant for that, but he took both her hands in his. Sabrina? He murmured, his voice echoing in the quiet room. Your father and I have come to an arrangement that will benefit both our families greatly. But business aside, I find myself completely captivated by you. I would be honored if you would become my wife. Sabrina gasped, tears of joy welling in her eyes. She didn't hesitate for a fraction of a second. Yes, oh Alaric, yes! She threw her arms around his neck. Over her shoulder, Alaric's cold blue eyes met mine. I immediately forced a look of absolute devastation onto my face. I let a single tear slip down my cheek, turning away and fleeing up the stairs, playing the part of the broken-hearted, jealous sister to perfection. When I reached my bedroom, I closed the door and locked it. I leaned against the heavy wood, listening to the muffled sounds of celebration downstairs. I didn't cry. I threw my head back and laughed until my ribs ached. The trap was set, and the prey had locked herself inside. The next 3 months were a whirlwind of nauseating extravagance. Alaric Carmichael didn't just want a wedding, he wanted a coronation. He poured millions into the event, dominating the society pages. Sabrina, drunk on her new status, morphed into an absolute tyrant. She fired 3 wedding planners, threw champagne glasses at seamstresses, and paraded her massive 10-carat emerald-cut diamond ring around the house like a weapon. I played my role flawlessly. I acted sullen, withdrawn, and bitter. I let Sabrina believe my silence was born of deep, agonizing jealousy. This fueled her ego, making her blind to the massive red flags waving right in front of her face. The first major red flag appeared 4 weeks before the wedding. I was sitting in the solarium reading when Alaric arrived unannounced with a man I recognized instantly. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. It was Dr. Philip Henderson. In my past life, Dr. Henderson was the physician Alaric kept on retainer. He was the one who prescribed me the vitamin supplements that slowly shut down my kidneys. He was the one who signed my death certificate in Italy, ruling my drowning a tragic accident caused by sudden cardiac arrest due to my deteriorating health. "Ah, Chloe," Alaric said smoothly, stepping into the sunroom. "Is your sister around?" "She's upstairs in a fitting," I replied, keeping my voice monotone, avoiding looking directly at Henderson's clinical, soulless eyes. "Excellent," Alaric smiled. "I brought Dr. Henderson to conduct Sabrina's premarital physical. Standard procedure for the Carmichael Trust. We require full comprehensive health screenings before any legal unions." "I'll go get her," I said quickly, standing up and leaving the room. I found Sabrina surrounded by tulle and lace. When I told her Alaric was downstairs with a doctor, she rolled her eyes. "A physical, honestly? The paranoia of old money?" she huffed, stepping off the pedestal. "Sabrina," I said, playing the concerned sister, lowering my voice. "Don't you think it's a bit strange making you take a medical exam before the wedding? It feels invasive." Sabrina stopped and glared at me. "You're just trying to find flaws because you're jealous, Chloe. Alaric is protecting his assets. He's ensuring his future heirs have strong genetics. It's a billionaire thing. You wouldn't understand." "I guess you're right," I murmured, stepping aside. She marched downstairs and willingly gave her blood, her vitals, and her complete medical history to the man who would eventually help orchestrate her murder. I watched from the top of the stairs as Dr. Henderson packed up his vials of Sabrina's blood. He needed to know her blood type. He needed to ensure her organs were healthy. He needed the baseline data to make her eventual illness look natural. The second red flag was the prenuptial agreement. It arrived a week before the wedding, a stack of legal documents thicker than a phone book. Father's lawyers reviewed it, but they were so desperate for the financial bailout that they ignored the predatory clauses buried deep in the text. I sneaked into my father's study late at night to read it. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. There it was. Clause 47. Section B. A mutual life insurance policy mandated by the Carmichael Trust insuring both spouses for $50 million in the event of accidental death or sudden illness, payable entirely to the surviving spouse. I remembered signing that document in my past life, too naive to understand its implications. The next morning at breakfast, Sabrina was hastily flipping through the signature pages, a gold Montblanc pen in her hand. "Are you sure you shouldn't read the whole thing?" I asked, sipping my coffee calmly. "There's a lot of fine print in there." "Chloe, please," Sabrina scoffed, signing her name with a flourish on the final page. "Father's lawyers already looked at it. Besides, Alaric loves me. The prenup guarantees me $10 million if we divorce. I'm securing my bag. Stop trying to ruin this for me." She slid the documents into the envelope. She had just signed her own death warrant, and she was smiling while she did it. The wedding day arrived with suffocating humidity. The Plaza Hotel was transformed into a sickeningly lavish garden of white orchids and crystal. Society's elite packed the ballroom. My father looked proud, his company saved by the blood money of his new son-in-law. Sabrina looked undeniably beautiful in her custom Vera Wang gown, heavily embroidered with pearls. But as I stood behind her as the maid of honor, holding her massive bouquet, all I saw was a lamb being led to the slaughter. Alaric stood at the altar, looking like a dark god. When Sabrina reached him, he smiled. It was the exact same smile he had given me on the deck of the yacht before the icy water swallowed me. "I do," Sabrina promised, her voice echoing through the grand hall. "I do," Alaric replied, sealing the contract. At the reception, the champagne flowed like water. I watched them dance their first dance. Sabrina rested her head on Alaric's chest, completely oblivious to the spiderweb she had just happily wrapped herself in. I slipped away from the ballroom, moving through the quiet, carpeted hallways of the hotel. I had already packed my bags. While everyone was distracted by the wedding of the century, I was leaving. I had quietly transferred a modest trust fund left by my mother into an offshore account. I had a new passport, a new identity, and a one-way ticket to Geneva. As I walked out of the plaza's side entrance, the cool night air hit my face. My phone buzzed in my purse. It was an automated text from Sabrina, no doubt scheduled by her assistant. "Just boarded the jet. Heading to Capri for the honeymoon. Wish you were here, little sister." "Actually, no I don't. XOXO. I stopped on the sidewalk, looking down at the glowing screen. Capri. The exact same place he had taken me. He wasn't even changing his playbook. I hailed a taxi, sliding into the back seat. "JFK Airport, please," I told the driver. As the cab pulled away from the glittering lights of the hotel, I rolled down the window, letting the city wind whip through my hair. I didn't feel an ounce of guilt. Sabrina had fought tooth and nail for the crown, ignoring every warning, trampling over me to get it. Now she would have to wear it. I smiled into the darkness. "Enjoy the yacht, Sabrina. Don't forget to hold your breath." Geneva offered a very different kind of cold than the freezing waters of the Tyrrhenian Sea. It was a crisp, clean, expensive chill that tasted of high-altitude air and absolute anonymity. For the first 8 months after Sabrina's spectacular doomed wedding, I barely existed on paper. I leased a minimalist penthouse overlooking Lake Geneva under the name Clara Hastings. I drank black coffee, wore neutral Loro Piana cashmere, and spent 12 hours a day in front of a wall of encrypted monitors, quietly building an empire. In my past life, Alaric's financial dominance had always seemed absolute. But knowing the future is the ultimate insider trading. I knew exactly which obscure biotech startups in Zurich would skyrocket in valuation. I knew which real estate conglomerates in London were about to face massive stock-tanking scandals. Through a labyrinth of shell companies managed by my discreet Swiss bankers at Lombard Odier, I turned my mother's modest $2 million trust into a staggering $60 million in less than a year. I wasn't just getting rich, I was building a war chest. While I grew stronger in the shadows, I kept a very close eye on the sister who had eagerly stolen my executioner. I had hired Theodore Croft, an ex-MI6 intelligence officer turned elite private investigator, to monitor the Carmichael estate. His weekly dossiers were the highlight of my Friday evenings. At first, the reports were exactly what you would expect from a billionaire's honeymoon. Tabloid photos showed Sabrina and Alaric on a mega yacht off the Amalfi coast, dripping in Chopard diamonds, drinking vintage Dom Perignon. Sabrina's Instagram feed was a curated exhibit of unbearable smugness. She posted photos of her custom Patek Philippe watches, her newly acquired Hermès Birkin collection, and endless selfies with Alaric, captioning them with nauseating phrases like, "building an empire with my king." I would sit on my velvet sofa in Switzerland, swirling a glass of Macallan 25, and laugh until my chest ached. She thought she was royalty. She didn't realize she was just a very expensive, very temporary asset. Then the shift happened. Just as it had in my past life, the honeymoon phase abruptly ended, and the reality of Alaric Carmichael's monstrous nature began to bleed through the gold plating. According to Croft's reports, in month 4 of the marriage, Alaric abruptly moved Sabrina out of their Manhattan penthouse and relocated them entirely to his isolated fortress-like estate in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. It was a sprawling 70-acre compound surrounded by dense pine forests and snow-capped peaks, accessible only by a single, heavily guarded private road. It was a beautiful prison. I knew it intimately. I remembered the suffocating silence of those massive log-vaulted ceilings. I remembered the freezing winters where you couldn't leave the property for weeks. Sabrina's social media presence vanished almost overnight. Her assistant was quietly fired. Her cell phone number was changed. "He's isolating the asset," Croft noted in his encrypted voice memo one evening, the sound of London traffic humming in the background. My contacts in the Wyoming State Police report that Alaric's private security firm, Aegis Solutions, has locked down the perimeter. No unapproved visitors. Sabrina hasn't been seen in town for over 6 weeks. And Chloe, Dr. Philip Henderson, just booked a private flight to Jackson Hole. It's starting. My blood ran cold, a phantom ache blooming in my kidneys. Dr. Henderson, the architect of the slow decline. I opened the file Croft had sent. It contained high-resolution telephoto images of Sabrina taken from a ridge 3 miles away. She was standing on the back terrace of the Jackson Hole mansion, wrapped in a thick fur coat. Even from that distance, the change in her was staggering. The vibrant, arrogant woman who had practically sprinted down the aisle was gone. She looked frail, her posture slumped, her face pale and drawn. Alaric's method was insidious. He didn't beat his wives. Bruises asked too many questions. Instead, he used Dr. Henderson to prescribe a custom cocktail of heavy metals and undetectable toxins disguised as elite wellness supplements and daily vitamin IV drips to combat fatigue. It caused chronic migraines, extreme lethargy, cognitive fog, and eventually total renal failure. It made the victim entirely dependent on him, too weak to run, and perfectly primed for a tragic sudden medical event. A small, traitorous pang of sympathy flared in my chest. I knew exactly what she was feeling, the confusion, the terrifying weakness, the desperate belief that her husband was just trying to help her get better. But then I remembered her mocking laughter on the day she stole my dress. I remembered how she had happily signed that prenuptial agreement, blinded by greed. I closed the file. The sympathy evaporated, replaced by cold, hard resolve. I wasn't going to save Sabrina, but I was going to use her suffering to utterly destroy the man inflicting it. By month 8, Alaric's financial house of cards was beginning to ignite. He was the golden boy of venture capital, but his entire image was a lie built on high-interest illegal loans from Dominic Castellano, the undisputed head of a massive, organized crime syndicate operating out of Chicago. In my previous life, I only discovered this right before Alaric drowned me when he was gloating about how my $50 million insurance policy would finally get Dominic off his back. This time, I was ahead of the game. I didn't just know about the debt. I actively made it worse. Operating under the guise of an aggressive hedge fund, I systematically shorted Alaric's legitimate shell companies. I hired proxy firms to outbid him on crucial real estate developments in Dubai and Tokyo, starving his cash flow. I was bleeding him dry and visible and merciless. Alaric's desperation made him sloppy, and his sloppiness made him cruel. The reports from Jackson Hole grew increasingly grim. Croft managed to bribe one of the estate's housekeepers, a woman named Maria, who provided horrifying insight into Sabrina's daily existence. Mrs. Carmichael rarely leaves her bedroom, Maria whispered into a burner phone during a recorded intercept. She cries constantly. She says her bones ache. Mr. Carmichael tells her she's just hysterical, that her mental health is deteriorating. He took away her internet access, said the screen time was causing her migraines. Yesterday she tried to call her father from the kitchen landline, but Mr. Carmichael caught her. He just smiled, gently took the phone, and hung it up. He told her she was too sick to upset her family. Our father, Ricky, was completely useless. I checked in on him through proxies. He was currently vacationing in St. Bart's, living off the massive capital injection Alaric had provided to his shipping company. Whenever Alaric called to give an update on Sabrina's struggle with chronic fatigue syndrome, Father just offered his sympathies and told Alaric to spare no expense on her care. He had sold his daughter, and he was too busy enjoying the profits to care about the return policy. But Sabrina was a fighter. Unlike me in my past life, who had been submissive and deeply trusting, Sabrina possessed a vicious, stubborn streak. Her vanity and her ego were massive, and as the poison stripped away her beauty, her compliance shattered. One evening in late November, a massive blizzard hit Jackson Hole, dumping 3 feet of snow and severing the main power lines. The estate kicked over to backup generators. In the chaos of the storm, Alaric's security detail was briefly distracted. My encrypted satellite phone buzzed at 2 a.m. I sat up in my Geneva penthouse, the glow of the city reflecting off the dark lake outside my window. The caller ID was a scrambled Wyoming area code. I hit accept, remaining completely silent. "Hello," a voice rasped. It sounded like cracked glass, thin and terrified. "Please. Is anyone there? Please." It was Sabrina. She had somehow managed to steal a burner phone from one of the security guards. "Ah, Sabrina," I said, my voice eerily calm in the quiet room, a sharp intake of breath. "Chloe, oh my God, Chloe, is that you? It's me." She began to sob, a wretched broken sound that echoed with pure despair. "Chloe, you have to help me. Please, you were right. You were right about him, about all of it. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I was awful to you. I'm dying, Chloe. He's killing me." I leaned back against my headboard, staring at the ceiling. "Alaric is a very busy man, Sabrina. Why would he want to kill his beautiful bride? The money?" She practically shrieked, panic, pitching her voice higher. "I found documents in his safe. He left it open. He's bankrupt, Chloe. He owes millions to some horrible people in Chicago. And the insurance policy. The prenup. It's $50 million. If I die, he gets it all. He's been poisoning me. The Dr. Henderson, he's in on it. Whenever he gives me the IV, I feel like my blood is on fire. He's going to kill me, Chloe. He's planning a trip. A healing retreat to the coast of Italy next month? I know I'm not coming back from it. You have to call the police. You have to call Father. Father knows Alaric is his financial lifeline," I replied coldly. "He won't intervene. And the police, Alaric owns the police in Wyoming. They'll just escort you right back to your bedroom for your own safety." "Then what do I do?" Sabrina wailed. Chloe, please, I'm your sister. You're the woman who stole my dress, insulted me, and practically shoved me out of the house so you could marry a billionaire, I corrected softly. You chose the crown, Sabrina. Now you have to carry the weight of it. Chloe, please, she begged, her voice dissolving into pathetic whimpers. I don't want to die. I closed my eyes. The sound of her crying brought back the terrifying sensation of water filling my lungs. I knew exactly what awaited her in Italy. The boat ride, the sudden shove, the agonizing panic beneath the waves. I didn't want to save her. But letting Alaric walk away with $50 million and a clean slate was completely unacceptable. He needed to burn, and Sabrina was the perfect kindling. Listen to me very carefully. I commanded, my voice slicing through her panic like a scalpel. If you do exactly what I tell you, you might survive. But you have to obey me perfectly. Do you understand? Yes, anything. She gasped. Stop fighting him. Stop complaining about the vitamins. Act like the perfect submissive dying wife. Let him take you to Italy. When the time comes, I will have everything in place. But what if you're not in time? Then you'd better hold your breath, I said, and ended the call. I immediately dialed Theodore Croft. Croft, wake up. It's time to move to phase 3. We need to introduce Alaric to his worst nightmare. Dominic Castellano was a man who preferred shadows, but his influence stained the entire Midwest. He was ruthless, old school, and absolutely abhorred being lied to. Alaric Carmichael had been lying to him for 3 years. I couldn't just walk into a Chicago mob front and hand over a dossier. I had to make the information look like it was uncovered by Castellano's own people. I instructed Croft to orchestrate a highly sophisticated digital breadcrumb trail. We hacked into the servers of Alaric's primary offshore holding company in the Cayman Islands. We didn't steal the money, there was barely any left to steal. Instead, we altered the metadata on the ledgers, making it look like Alaric had been skimming from the interest he owed the Castellanos and funneling it into a hidden, untraceable cryptocurrency wallet in the Bahamas. Then Croft, anonymously, tipped off Leo Falcone, Dominic's violently temperamental underboss. The reaction was instantaneous and explosive. Within 48 hours, Alaric's pristine, carefully controlled world began to fracture. 2 of his legitimate business partners in New York were severely beaten in a parking garage by unidentified assailants wearing ski masks. A warning. The windshield of Alaric's bulletproof Maybach in Jackson Hole was shattered by a sniper bullet while parked in the driveway. Another warning. Castellano wanted his money. All of it. Now, through a hacked microphone in Alaric's home office, I listened to the mighty billionaire unravel. I need more time! Alaric screamed into his phone, the sound of breaking glass echoing in the background as he threw a tumbler against the wall. Leo, listen to me. I have an asset liquidating in 2 weeks. 50 million completely clean straight into the domestic accounts. I can pay the principal and the penalty interest. You have 10 days, Alaric, Leo Falcone's gravelly voice replied through the speaker. Dominic is very disappointed. If the money isn't in the account by the 15th, we don't just take your companies. We take you, piece by piece. The line went dead. Alaric's breathing was heavy, ragged. I could almost picture him pacing the mahogany floor like a caged panther. He was cornered. And a cornered predator always strikes its weakest prey. Maria Pfehr. Alaric barked over the intercom, his voice instantly smoothing out into that terrifying, icy calm. Pack my wife's bags and tell the pilot to prep the Gulf Stream. The sea air will do her good. We're leaving for the Amalfi Coast tonight. The timeline had accelerated. I stood up from my desk in Geneva, watching the sunrise paint the Swiss Alps in shades of violent orange and bruised purple. The final act was beginning. I spent the next 12 hours securing my logistics. I chartered a private jet under a corporate alias, filing a flight plan for Naples, Italy. I wired €3 million to a private maritime security contractor composed of former Italian special forces. I wasn't going to rely on the local carabinieri. Alaric had enough money left to bribe the local police into looking the other way, just like he had when he murdered me. I needed operators who answered only to me. Before I left the penthouse, I made one final phone call. It was risky, but necessary to seal Alaric's fate completely. I dialed the direct line for the Securities and Exchange Commission's elite financial fraud division in Washington, D.C., using voice modulation software. I have conclusive documentary evidence of massive wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit murder involving Alaric Carmichael. I told the lead investigator, "Check the secure inbox I just routed to your server. The flight logs, the medical records from Dr. Philip Henderson, the offshore ledgers, it's all there. He is currently fleeing the jurisdiction to Italy. If you want the arrest of the decade, I suggest you coordinate with Interpol immediately." I hung up before they could trace the origin ping. By the time I landed in Naples, the Mediterranean heat washed over me heavy and fragrant with lemon and salt. It was a beautiful place to die. I had thought so 3 years ago, staring out at the sparkling water before the darkness took me. I met my security team leader, a scarred, stoic man named Matteo, at a private dock in Salerno. "Signora Hastings." Matteo nodded, handing me a pair of high-powered marine binoculars. We tracked Carmichael's yacht, the Obsidian. It dropped anchor 3 miles off the coast of Positano an hour ago. The sea is getting rough. Storm rolling in from the south. "Perfect," I murmured. "Our intercept boat is ready." Matteo continued gesturing to a sleek, matte black tactical interceptor vessel, bobbing in the water, armed with twin outboard motors that could outrun anything on the coast. "We have thermal imaging and audio surveillance patched into their onboard systems. He has a skeleton crew. Only the captain, 2 deckhands, and his personal bodyguard." "And the wife?" I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. Matteo checked his tablet. "Thermal shows 2 heat signatures on the aft deck. 1 standing, 1 sitting." I looked out toward the horizon, where dark, bruising storm clouds were beginning to swallow the sun. The water was turning from a brilliant turquoise to a deep, terrifying black. The stage was set exactly as it had been before. The isolation, the storm, the looming accident. "Let's go," I commanded, stepping onto the interceptor. "And Matteo, no sirens, no lights. We approach in the blind spot. I want to see the look on his face when his ghost comes back to haunt him." The engines roared to life, a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the deck plates. As we sped out into the churning sea, salt spray stinging my cheeks, I checked the waterproof Glock 19 holstered at my hip. I had spent 3 years learning how to shoot, how to fight, how to survive. I was no longer the frightened, naive girl in the pink dress. I was the architect of his demise. Alaric Carmichael thought he was playing a game of chess with the devil. He didn't realize the devil had already surrendered her seat to me. Rain slashed against the reinforced glass of our interceptor vessel, each drop sounding like a tiny bullet, as we tore through the violently churning waters of the Tyrrhenian Sea. The storm had arrived with a vengeance, turning the sky into a bruised canopy of charcoal and violet. Waves the size of small buildings crashed against our hull, but Matteo steered the matte black tactical boat with terrifying precision. We were running completely dark. No navigation lights, no radio chatter, just the roaring engines and the relentless thunder. Through the salt-streaked windshield, the Obsidian finally materialized out of the gloom. Alaric Carmichael's 70-foot luxury yacht was anchored 3 miles off the rocky coast of Positano, pitching wildly in the heavy swells. It looked exactly as I remembered it from my nightmares, a sleek floating coffin of white fiberglass and tinted glass. 300 meters! Matteo yelled over the howl of the wind, his hands tightly gripping the wheel. Thermal shows the target and the wife are moving from the main saloon to the aft deck. He's pushing her outside. My chest tightened, a phantom burning sensation flaring in my lungs. I remembered that exact walk. I remembered Alaric's hand on the small of my back, guiding me out into the freezing storm under the guise of looking at the lightning. I remembered the sudden paralyzing realization that we were completely alone, and the sheer crushing force of his hands shoving me over the railing into the black abyss. I drew my Glock 19 from its holster, checking the chamber in the dim glow of the boat's instrument panel. My hands, which used to tremble at the mere sound of Alaric's voice, were completely steady. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the executioner. "Bring us alongside the stern swimming platform," I ordered, my voice cold and flat. "We board in 2 minutes. Silent takedowns for the crew. Alaric belongs to me." Matteo gave a sharp nod. He cut the twin outboard engines, letting the violent momentum of the waves carry us the rest of the way. We glided into the massive blind spot behind the obsidian. The yacht's massive hull shielded us from the worst of the wind. 2 of Matteo's operators, dressed in full black tactical gear, stepped to the bow with muffled grappling hooks. With synchronized precision, they threw the lines over the yacht's polished steel railings. We scrambled up the slick fiberglass, moving like shadows. I swung my legs over the railing and landed silently on the teak decking of the swimming platform. The storm masked any noise we made. Matteo signaled with 2 fingers, pointing toward the portside stairwell leading up to the crew quarters. He and 1 operator vanished into the darkness to neutralize the captain and the deckhands. The 3rd operator, a massive man named Luca, flanked me as I moved slowly up the starboard stairs toward the aft deck. The wind screamed, whipping my wet hair across my face. As I crested the top of the stairs, I crouched behind a white leather sectional sofa. Through the driving rain, illuminated by the sporadic flashes of lightning, I saw them. Sabrina was backed against the heavy glass railing. She was drenched, wearing a thin silk evening gown that clung to her frail, emaciated frame. The poison Dr. Philip Henderson had pumped into her veins had ravaged her body, leaving her pale, shaking, and desperately weak. She was weeping hysterically, her hands clutching the metal rail behind her, as if it were her only lifeline. Standing 4 feet away from her was Alaric. He was perfectly composed, dressed in a black turtleneck and dark slacks, seemingly impervious to the storm raging around him. He held a crystal tumbler of whiskey in his hand, looking at Sabrina with an expression of absolute terrifying boredom. Behind him, standing by the sliding glass doors of the saloon, was his massive personal bodyguard, a brute named Jensen. "Alaric, please!" Sabrina screamed, her voice tearing over the thunder. "I'll sign the divorce papers, I'll give you everything. Just let me go home, I need a doctor." Alaric took a slow sip of his whiskey, shaking his head with a mockingly sad smile. "You don't understand, darling. There is no divorce. A divorce gives me a fraction of your worthless father's failing company. I need liquidity. I need cash. And right now, your beautiful, fragile little life is worth exactly $50 million. "You're insane," Sabrina sobbed, her knees buckling slightly. "The police will know, my father will investigate, that your father," Alaric laughed, the sound cruel and sharp, "is currently heavily sedated in a high-roller suite in Macau, gambling away the last of the bailout money I gave him. He won't ask a single question as long as I keep paying for his lifestyle. And the Italian authorities? They already know you've been suffering from a tragic, rapid neurological decline. Dr. Henderson's impeccable medical records prove it. When you tragically slip and fall into the water tonight, swept away by the storm, It will just be a heartbreaking end to a terrible illness. He took a step toward her. Sabrina screamed a raw, primal sound of absolute terror. Alaric reached out his strong hands, gripping her frail shoulders. It's nothing personal, Sabrina. It's just business. Take a deep breath. It's faster if you don't fight it. He lunged forward, preparing to lift her by the waist and hurl her over the edge. Jensen! I said, my voice cutting through the storm, artificially amplified by a small megaphone strapped to my tactical vest. The bodyguard spun around, reaching inside his jacket for his weapon. He didn't even clear his holster. Luca stepped out from the shadows with blinding speed, bringing the butt of his suppressed rifle crashing down into the side of Jensen's skull. The massive man crumpled to the teak deck without making a sound, out cold. Alaric froze, his hands still gripping Sabrina's dress. He slowly turned his head, his icy blue eyes scanning the darkness. I stepped out from behind the sectional sofa, the storm raging around me. I walked into the pool of light spilling from the yacht's saloon. I had my Glock raised, the tritium night sights aligned perfectly with the center of Alaric Carmichael's chest. Lightning ripped across the sky, illuminating my face in a stark, blinding flash. Alaric's mouth fell open. The crystal tumbler slipped from his fingers, shattering into 100 pieces on the wooden deck. His face, usually a mask of arrogant perfection, drained of all color. He looked like a man who had just watched the ground open up to swallow him. "Hello, Alaric," I said, my voice dead calm. "You're repeating your material. The tragic drowning in Italy? It's a bit cliché the second time around, don't you think?" "Chloe!" Sabrina gasped, her voice barely a squeak. She collapsed onto the deck, completely drained, staring at me as if I were a hallucination brought on by the poison. Alaric stumbled backward, bumping into the glass railing. He blinked rapidly, shaking his head. "No! No, that's impossible! You're dead! I watched you die! The Coast Guard recovered the body! I identified you!" "You identified a bloated Jane Doe that your security team paid the local coroner 50,000 euros to mislabel." I corrected smoothly, taking another step forward. My finger rested lightly on the trigger. "You really should vet the people you bribe, Alaric. Sometimes they take a better offer from the ghost they're supposed to be burying. You survived." He stammered, his mind desperately trying to process the impossibility standing in front of him. The invincible billionaire was completely unraveling. "Where have you been? Why are you here?" "I've been in Geneva," I replied, lowering the gun, just a fraction wanting him to look me in the eye. "While you were busy poisoning my sister and playing house in Wyoming, I was busy dismantling your life." "What are you talking about?" He spat a desperate, defensive anger beginning to replace his shock. "I'm Alaric Carmichael. You're a pathetic little college girl. You can't touch me." I couldn't help it. I laughed. It was a dark, chilling sound that even frightened Sabrina, who was huddled on the floor, shivering violently. "You really haven't checked your offshore accounts today, have you?" I asked, tilting my head. Alaric's eyes darted nervously. "My accounts are secured with biometric encryption. Biometric encryption only works if your lead server administrator in the Cayman Islands doesn't sell his backdoor access codes to a private intelligence firm for $5 million. I stated flatly. "Theodore Croft sends his regards, by the way. I believe you met him briefly when he posed as a catering manager at your wedding." Alaric's breathing hitched. Panic, raw and unfiltered, finally bled into his eyes. "I know everything, Alaric." I continued pacing slowly across the deck, forcing him to track my movements like a cornered animal. "I know about the 200 million you owe Dominic Castellano. I know about the predatory loans. I know you've been floating your legitimate businesses with dirty Chicago syndicate money. And I know you plan to use Sabrina's life insurance payout to get Leo Falcone off your back. You shut your mouth! Alaric hissed, his hands balling into fists. He looked frantically at Luca, then back to me, trying to calculate the odds of rushing me. I wouldn't, I warned, raising the gun back to his chest. Luca used to hunt cartel lieutenants in Calabria. He'll put a hollow point through your kneecap before you can blink. Alaric froze, swallowing hard. But here is the truly tragic part, Alaric. I smiled a vicious, triumphant smirk. There is no $50 million. Even if you threw Sabrina into the ocean tonight, the policy is void. I had Croft leak Dr. Henderson's true medical logs to the insurance underwriters 3 days ago. They know the illness was artificially induced. It's categorized as insurance fraud and attempted homicide. The policy is canceled. You bitch! Alaric roared, his face turning a mottled, furious red. He took a half-step forward, but Luca immediately racked the bolt of his rifle. The sharp metallic clack echoed over the thunder. Alaric stopped dead. But I didn't stop there, I said softly, twisting the knife deep into his ego. Because Dominic Castellano doesn't care about your insurance fraud. He just wants his money. So, 12 hours ago, I took the liberty of emptying your last remaining Cayman Shell Company. All $62 million of your hidden emergency reserves. Alaric looked like he was having a stroke. You stole it. You can't. That money is untraceable. Oh, it's very traceable, I corrected. Especially because I didn't keep it. I transferred every single cent into a decentralized cryptocurrency wallet directly controlled by Leo Falcone. And then I left a massive, glaring digital trail, making it look like you orchestrated the transfer to hide the funds from a federal audit. Alaric stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. The reality of what I had done was crashing over him like the waves against the hull. Do you understand what that means, Alaric? I whispered, stepping right into his personal space, my gun pressed firmly against the center of his chest. To the SEC and Interpol, you're a massive fraudster who just tried to hide assets and flee the country. I sent them the flight logs and the wire transfers. They are issuing a red notice as we speak. He began to hyperventilate, his eyes wide with absolute terror. But more importantly, I continued leaning in so close I could smell the expensive whiskey on his breath. To Dominic Castellano, you are a lying, thieving rat who tried to skim $60 million from his syndicate and stash it in his own underboss's account to start a mafia civil war. You didn't just fail to pay them back, Alaric. You insulted them. You tried to frame them. They'll kill me! Alaric whispered, his voice cracking, tears of sheer panic finally pooling in his eyes. Castellano will skin me alive. He'll torture me for months. I know, I smiled, the same smile he gave me right before I drowned. Karma is a beautiful thing, isn't it? With a sudden, desperate roar, Alaric slapped my gun aside and lunged for my throat. He was fast driven by the absolute terror of a dead man walking. His hands closed around my neck, squeezing with terrifying force. I didn't panic. I didn't flinch. I dropped my weight, bringing my knee up with devastating force directly into his groin. Alaric gagged his grip, instantly loosening. As he doubled over, I brought the heavy steel frame of my Glock down hard against his temple. The billionaire crumpled to the deck, groaning in agony, blood pouring from the gash on his head. Matteo! I called out. The heavy glass door slid open, and Matteo stepped onto the aft deck, wiping a spot of blood from his tactical glove. The crew is secured in the lower galley, Signora. Zip-tied and gagged. Secure him! I pointed at Alaric, who was writhing on the teak decking. Luca and Matteo dragged Alaric to the heavy steel base of the yacht's outdoor dining table. They bound his wrists and ankles with heavy-duty industrial zip ties, pulling them so tight they cut off the circulation. They gagged him with a roll of medical tape, silencing his desperate, pathetic pleas for mercy. I turned my attention to Sabrina. She was still huddled on the floor, staring at me with wide, hollow eyes. The rain had plastered her thin hair to her skull. She looked nothing like the arrogant, cruel sister who had stolen my dress and my life. She was just a broken, terrified shell. "Get up," I said coldly. She flinched. "Chloe, you saved me. You actually came for me." She reached out a trembling hand toward me, tears streaming down her pale cheeks. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I was so wrong about him. We can go home now. We can fix this." I looked down at her outstretched hand, feeling absolutely nothing. No sisterly affection, no lingering anger, just a profound, cold emptiness. "We aren't going anywhere together, Sabrina," I said, my voice cutting through her delusions. Her hand dropped. "What? What do you mean? I didn't come here to save you because I love you." I stated the brutal truth hanging in the stormy air. "I came here because Alaric needed to be destroyed, and your little tragedy was the perfect bait. You walked into this trap with your eyes wide open. You ignored every warning. You trampled over me to get a crown, and you found out it was made of thorns. But I'm your sister," she wailed, clutching her chest. "I'm sick. I need a hospital at—" "Mateo has an emergency medical kit on the interceptor," I said, turning my back on her. "He'll give you a heavy dose of activated charcoal and a broad-spectrum chelating agent. It will stop the heavy metal poisoning from progressing. You'll live, but it will take years of dialysis and physical therapy to recover." "Chloe, please don't leave me," she begged, trying to crawl toward me on the wet deck. "I have no money. The prenup, you said the insurance is voided. I have nothing." "You have your life," I said, looking over my shoulder one last time. "Which is a lot more than I had 3 years ago. You're alive, Sabrina, but you are completely broke. Your reputation is tied to an international fugitive, and our father won't answer your calls once his casino credit runs out. Welcome to the real world," I signaled to Mateo. "Take her to the interceptor. Administer the antidote. Leave her at the public docks in Salerno. She can find her own way from there." Luca scooped Sabrina off the deck effortlessly. She thrashed and screamed my name, sobbing hysterically, as he carried her over the railing and down onto the tactical boat. I ignored her cries, walking over to where Alaric was tied to the table. He was staring up at me, his icy blue eyes wide with terror and pleading. The arrogant predator was gone. Only a pathetic, ruined animal remained. "Interpol has been tracking my satellite pings since we boarded," I told him, quietly crouching down so I was eye level with him. "The Italian Coast Guard will be here in exactly 12 minutes. They have the arrest warrants. But here is the fun part, Alaric." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, waterproof satellite phone. I set it on the deck, just out of reach of his bound hands. "I also sent your exact GPS coordinates to Leo Falcone's hit squad in Naples," I whispered. "They have a speedboat. They are about 15 minutes away." Alaric squeezed his eyes shut, violent sobs shaking his chest. "Let's see who gets here first." I smiled. "The police, who will lock you in a maximum security cell, where Castellano's men will eventually slit your throat, or the hit squad, who will just do it right here on your beautiful yacht. Either way, Alaric, you're going to drown in your own blood." I stood up, the rain washing away the last remnants of my past. I felt lighter. I felt reborn. "Goodbye, Alaric." I climbed down the slippery fiberglass ladder onto the interceptor boat. Mateo immediately gunned the engines, and we tore away from the obsidian, disappearing into the stormy darkness. I didn't look back. I didn't need to see the flashing blue lights of the Coast Guard helicopters that broke through the clouds 10 minutes later, nor did I care to know if the mafia hitmen arrived first. Alaric Carmichael was a ghost erased from the world of the living just as brutally as he had tried to erase me. We dropped Sabrina off at the commercial docks in Salerno just before dawn. The rain had stopped leaving the coastal town, smelling of wet stone and salt. Luca placed her on a wooden bench under a flickering street lamp. She was shivering, clutching a thermal blanket around her frail shoulders the medical IV port Matteo had inserted, taped securely to her arm. She looked up at me one last time from the deck of the boat. There was no more screaming, no more begging, just a horrifying realization of the empty, penniless void her life had become. I didn't say a word. I just gave Matteo the nod, and we sped out of the harbor. That was the last time I ever saw my sister. 6 months later, I sat by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new penthouse in Zurich, sipping a cup of black coffee as the morning sun illuminated the snow-capped Alps. My laptop was open on the mahogany desk, glowing with financial reports. The news of Alaric Carmichael's downfall had dominated the global headlines for weeks. He had been intercepted by the Italian authorities mere minutes before the Castellano hitmen boarded his yacht. He was currently sitting in solitary confinement in a federal supermax prison, awaiting trial for international wire fraud, embezzlement, and attempted murder. His entire financial empire had been seized and liquidated. Dr. Philip Henderson had been arrested at JFK attempting to board a flight to Dubai, singing like a canary to avoid life in prison. As for my father, Ricky Adams' shipping company imploded the moment Alaric's fraudulent backing vanished. He was bankrupt, living in a squalid studio apartment in Queens, endlessly calling a daughter who no longer existed. I took a sip of my coffee, pulling up the master ledger of my offshore accounts under the name Clara Hastings. The numbers on the screen were staggering. By aggressively shorting Alaric's companies before releasing the criminal evidence and carefully manipulating the market panic, my war chest had grown to nearly $400 million. I was no longer the frightened, desperate girl seeking approval from a father who didn't care, or a sister who wanted me destroyed. I had walked through the fire, outsmarted the devil, and claimed the throne entirely for myself. I didn't just survive the death trap. I redesigned it, handed them the keys, and watched them lock themselves inside. The past was finally dead. But my empire was just beginning to breathe. What an absolute roller coaster. Did Chloe deliver the perfect revenge? Or was leaving Sabrina penniless on the docks, taking it one step too far? Alaric definitely got what he deserved, but who do you think he's more afraid of, the federal prosecutors or Dominic Castellanos' men waiting for him in prison? Drop your wildest theories in the comments below. If you loved this dark, twisted journey of betrayal and rebirth, you have to smash that like button, share this video with your fellow drama lovers, and hit subscribe right now. Turn on notifications so you don't miss our next insane true-life revenge story. Let's hit 15,000 likes, squad. See you in the next one.